Uh, Hello, everybody. My name is Anthony Comley. Doing a webinar today with Opus for Volkswagen and Audi diesel SCR systems. I see some participants getting into the room right now. So I'll give it a few seconds here and then I'll start my little thing here. Again, good afternoon to some of you guys. Good evening to the people on the East Coast. I am doing a webinar here on Volkswagen and Audi diesel SCR systems, or the reductant systems here. Okay. Uh, my name is Anthony again. I work with Opus. I am a Volkswagen Audi uh, diagnostician here. So if you are a Opus customer, I'm sure you have dealt with me before. As I go through the slides here, you'll notice a little QR code down on the bottom right-hand corner. That QR code, basically, if you have any questions or anything regarding the product of the webinar, you can actually hit that QR code and reach out to us. That way, one of us can get back in contact with you with information, or if you just want some information on products that we do offer. And then I will go over a little bit that at the end. But for now, let's get this webinar going. I'm gonna turn off my screen for now, and then we'll start this. All right. So first things first, when it comes to Volkswagen Audi, we all know that they did have major issues back in 2014, 2015 with the whole Dieselgate scandal. Okay. Right now we're in 2025. So a lot of them are pretty much out of warranty now. There are a few cars that are still in warranty. I believe 2015, some very early 2016 models were still in warranty, because a lot of those 15 and 16s, as far as the diesel emissions warranty went, they were actually covered for 10 years, 162,000 miles. Okay. The two websites I have listed on here, vwdieselinfo.com and audidieselookup.com. Okay, this can be used either for your personal cars, or if you guys have a shop, work at a shop, where the case may be, and you have a customer that brings in a diesel, you want to see if it is covered under warranty, you can actually go to these two websites. These are for the US market vehicles. That way you can punch in the VIN number and then you can verify if the car is still under warranty. Okay. Most of them, as far as early generation goes, they were 10 years, 120,000 miles. Okay. After the whole Dieselgate scandal, when Volkswagen came out with a repair, the vehicle was offered with a 4-year, 48,000 mile additional warranty based on when the repair was done. Okay. Some of them got a 4-year, 60,000 mile warranty. It all depends on the vehicle that and when the recall was done. So this is a really good websites to punch in the VIN number of the vehicle you have. That way you can take a look at and see if the vehicle is indeed covered under warranty. I know some dealerships, you'll call and you'll ask them if it's covered under warranty. They'll say it's not. That way, at least here, it shows, yeah, it is still covered under warranty, and I'll explain what we're going to be doing next. So when you go to one of the websites here, the first one I did is the Volkswagen website, okay? On here, it says, look up current TDI diesel emissions modification status. The reason I bring up these warranty sites is because realistically, this webinar is about SCR on the vehicles. SCR is a common failure on these cars, okay? It's a byproduct, basically, that we need to make sure, as far as Volkswagen goes, because it is federally mandated to where if the SCR system is not working, the vehicle will not run. All right. They have this built into the systems. And if some of you guys have seen these cars, you'll get the mileage countdown to the point where the car doesn't start. All right. Now, if you look on the site here, you're going to put the VIN number in. It will tell you once you submit it, it will pull up the information on that vehicle. Okay. You can also see, if you look on here on this page, they give you hyperlinks. You can get more information on the diesel emissions settlement program, what was offered, also the emissions modification process on what was done to the vehicle if it was done. All right. Once you punch in a VIN number, this is the Audi site. Okay. Oops. Once you punch in the VIN number, and the Audi site looks identical. Okay, it's just two different sites. But once you punch in the VIN number, this is what you'll get. All right. As an example, I used a 2015 Golf Wagon TDI because it is still 2025 and and it looks like on this one is a specialty. It's 11 years, 162,000 miles. Okay. So on the 11 years, 162,000 mile warranty, that's from the sales date of the vehicle, which unfortunately we do not have access to. That's something that you can contact the dealer on, but it does have an 11-year, 160,000 mile warranty. So this car would still be covered until next year. All right. Now, that being said, if you scroll down a little bit and you look, it says in addition, the extended emissions warranty on this one runs for 5 years, 60,000 mile warranty. And that modification was done on November 6, 2017 at 29,000 miles. All right. So realistically, 5 years from 2017, that car is already out of the extended emissions warranty, but the original emissions warranty, it is still covered, assuming the vehicle is under 162,000 miles. All right. Now, if it is what you need to do, contact the local dealer, tell them, hey, I got a car here that's punched up on the website, should still be covered under warranty. Hey, some dealerships will help you out, some will not. Depends on where you're going, who you're going to. But if you have a really good relationship with your local dealership and the car is under warranty, they should be covered. All right. Reason we bring it up, obviously, we want to take care of the customer first. Okay. When you take care of the customer, they're happy. They will come back for other additional things, or when the car goes out of warranty. Right. And we do know, as far as the emission stuff, all the diesel stuff is very expensive. All right. This one particular, we're going to be talking about the SCR systems. We already know how expensive the particulate filter is, the EGR system. Realistically, they kind of tie into each other. All right. Now, with that being said, let's get on to the SCR system. Now, I'm going to be going over a lot of information here. I'm going to try to push as much of it through as quickly as possible. I will tell you this. Okay, this is the most common thing that we get asked, all right? Hey, my car has a glow plug light, okay? Hey, my car has a particulate filter light. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's an issue with it, all right? If you guys have noticed on diesels, or if you guys ever pay attention to it, compared to gas cars, diesels do not have an EPC light, all right? They have a mill light, right? The little check engine light, which is indicated here, but they have a glow plug light and they also have a diesel particulate filter light. Okay. Now, most of the time, you'll see a diesel particulate filter light. It'll come in, you'll automatically think there's something going on with the particulate filter. That's not necessarily true. Okay. The particulate filter light can come on for various things. All right. You can go and get the car in and scan it and the light will be on. Doesn't necessarily mean that there is a fault. What that usually means is that, hey, this car is still doing a regen, all right? Whether it be for the particulate filter or a NOx catalyst regen, which is what we're going to be talking about, all right? Now, as I said, that diesel particulate filter light, it can be turned on from the car being driven, a short distance in the city, not really going on the highway. Usually that indicates, hey, this car needs to be regenerated. And like I said, most of the time, it's not necessarily just a particulate filter. It can also mean the NOx catalyst. These cars have to be driven. They do not like being driven around the city. Okay. If you do not get it on the highway, if you do not get it under load, okay, it never goes into what we call a natural regen state. So the particulate filter never gets regenerated. The NOx catalyst never gets regenerated. And then it ends up causing more issues, right? So we don't know NOx catalyst can get plugged up as well. And it usually gets plugged up due to DPF filter is failing, because what's going to happen is that now that soot is no longer being combusted in that particulate filter. Now that soot is going past the particulate filter, it's going into the NOx catalyst, and then it is pretty much plugging up the NOx catalyst, or with our systems with AdBlue, you're going to have even more issues. Okay. Now, glow plug light real quick. That right there could usually indicate, right, when you start the car, the glow plugs are warming up and getting ready to start, or it will flash, right, like an EPC light. That is a secondary warning. Okay, so the glow plug and or the diesel particulate filter light can come along with the check engine light to be a secondary warning like the EPC lights. All right. So, like I said, glow plug indicator, glow plug period for driver starting the engine, or it flashes to notify of an engine malfunction. Check engine light, we all know what the check engine light does. Particulate filter light, like I said, it can be either the particulate filter there's an issue, can't be regenerated, it's going through a regeneration, or there's a NOx issue that's going on here. Okay, pay attention to what the lights are on. Now, the exhaust gas treatment module. Okay, so the 4 cylinders are pretty much identical down the lines that had SCR, right? CJA engines, all the first generation engines did not have SCR. Okay. SCR came on the second generation engines, the Passats, and obviously all the V6 TDI engines. Now, this one particular here is the 4 cylinder. This is pretty much in every single car, like the Golf wagons, the A3 diesels. This is what you're going to be seeing. Now, the NOx catalyst is combined with the particulate filter. They call it an oxidizing catalyst. So what happens now, instead of having a NOx catalyst that's separate, like on the V6 with the AdBlue system, this is directly in the oxidizing catalyst, which is part of the particulate filter. Okay. Now, what's going to happen here is it's going to have the injector right at the very top. So on the 4 cylinders, you can normally see, once you pull the engine cover off, you'll see the top of the SCR catalyst or oxidizing cat. All right. You can usually see the injector right at the top. Okay. This is pretty much the catalyst, the combination of the NOx catalyst and the particulate filter together. Okay. Basically what it's going to do is basically oxidize all the carbon monoxide that's produced during the soot regeneration from the particulate filter, right? Because what do we have? What's the whole point of this? It's to lower our NOx emissions, right? So what happens is that the ammonia and the AdBlue is what we're going to go over to SCR, is what's causing that to lower the NOx emissions. Now, this right here is the Volkswagen Golf and the A3s, very similar, okay? A3s, some of these, you can see they came in a Quattro, right? You'll see a double saddle tank. Well, on this one, it's not the same, okay? The AdBlue tank sits on the rear, all right? So you'll have the full fuel tank here on the bottom, and then you'll have the AdBlue tank in the rear. So the AdBlue filling port or the service port is going to be where the fuel door is. Okay, that's on the Golf wagon. That is on the A3s. On the Passats, the SCR or the AdBlue fill port is going to be in the trunk. It's going to have a little cover. All right. The Passats were the only weird ones. They were the first ones to come out with the SCR system. It's a car that has had multiple issues. Most of the issues that you do see out there when it comes to Passats, you know, people always ask, why am I replacing everything? Well, we're going to go over why, because if we know the characteristics of the DEF fluid or AdBlue fluid, you'll see why. Okay. This is a V6. All right. So essentially on here on the V6, one, usually we have a bigger vehicle because it's usually in a bigger vehicle, the Audi A8s. the A6 TDIs, the Q5s, Q7s, okay, the Turigs. Now, that being said, we do know that the oxidizing catalyst and the particulate filter are towards the rear. Now, this one also has, on the V6, a NOx catalyst, which is downstream, right? This is more towards the middle of the vehicle, right before the actual muffler, all right? Biggest characteristics on here, you'll see that the injector is placed ahead of the NOx catalyst, right? So different concepts, the way these things are used, different concept on how the AdBlue is introduced into this system, okay? Now, most of these will all have the same and similar components. You're going to have a pump in a separate tank. You're going to have heaters in the system, which we're going to go over, right? You're going to have a dosing injector or the reducing agent injector. You'll have the ECM. Some of these will have a separate module that controls the heating circuit. You'll have NOx sensors, right? Because these NOx sensors are going to indicate what our NOx emission has gone once the AdBlue has been injected through the NOx catalyst. Needs to see if this thing is working efficiently, okay? Obviously, we're going to have two different sensors. We're going to have one all the way upstream, right before the oxidizing catalyst. Then we're going to have a second one at the very back behind the NOx catalyst. So the whole principle on this, most of the time, the NOx catalyst, it has to be at 356 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius, okay? That gets pretty hot. What do we know about diesels? They don't get hot very quickly, right? They don't get to operating temperature very quickly. That's why these cars that putt around town and we don't get them on the highway, they never get hot enough to get the NOx cat hot to go into a regen mode, okay? Now, there's obviously exhaust gas temp sensors that are looking at this, okay? Everything's gonna be monitored. NOx sensor is gonna monitor it. They're gonna compare the values so the ECM can control how much AdBlue is being injected into the system, right? So reducing agent is injected into the hot exhaust gas flow, right? The water, which is part of the AdBlue, is gonna evaporate because of heat. Now, the next process is what's in AdBlue, right? It's also ammonia. So that ammonia will mix with the components, the carbon dioxide, and what it's going to do is that it's going to break this down, right? It's going to break it down through hydrolysis. Now, this is the whole point, because once you do that and you eliminate, you're going to cause the nitrogen dioxide from forming in the exhaust and instead turn into nitrogen in water. So the whole point is to break down the NOx, okay, from the exhaust so it comes out as clean as possible. Now, AdBlue is it's basically the industry name, right? What it's actually is diesel exhaust fluid or DEF fluid, all right? Obviously, we know in pure form, ammonia, it's basically, it can, it's not good for the skin. It's not good it's not good to be sniffed. You can't breathe it in. So this is actually mixed, all right? Now, this number right here that we see at the bottom, 32.5%, all right? That is a special number which you will need to remember, because when you're diagnosing this, sometimes it comes down to what type of DEF fluid was used, right? Customers driving along the interstate, their light comes on, hey, I need to fill up with some DEF. They stop by the local Buc-ee's and they get, whatever DEF fluid they have there, right? As far as a Volkswagen Audi standpoint, they don't like aftermarket DEF fluid, right? Sometimes this aftermarket DEF fluid, it doesn't contain 32.5%. Okay, some of these contain less, some of these contain more. All right, now the ECM knows this, the depth fluid, it looks at it and it compares it. It will throw some efficiency faults. All right. So we got to make sure and find out from customers what we're actually running in there. All right. Now, as far as this goes here, the properties of this here, right? It freezes at 12 degrees Fahrenheit. So depending on where you live, no matter what you do, we can still have issues with depth fluid, right? So at approximately 158 degrees, 176 degrees, the reducing agent decomposes. Okay, so that's why you can smell, depending on you can smell it in the exhaust sometimes, and sometimes people can complain about it. Right now, here's the thing: we all know that depth fluid should not be on all times. If you're smelling it consistently, maybe we have an issue with an injector that's stuck open, and then the customer is complaining about the constant smell of ammonia, and we all know what ammonia smells like, right? So essentially, we have to monitor certain things, right? We have to make sure that one, if you live in a very cold climate, I mean, obviously 12 degrees, there are only a few places that get that cold. For the most part, most of us are okay, but that's why we have heaters in the system. So the reducing agent tank system, right? Most of the tanks are at least on the V6s are at least 4.4 gallons, right? So realistically, to fill up one of these, you'll probably need two of the big jugs, right? Now, on the V6s like the Turgs and the Q7s, the fill port is actually in the spare tire well, right? So when we look at it, sometimes when we're taking a look at the spare tire port, you can see crystallization. Well, we need to check to see this because it will want to escape. Now, the tank itself is made from plastic. Most of these are in an aluminum tray. Okay, they're usually bolted up underneath the vehicle. Most of these have to be serviced by dropping the entire tank, right? You cannot service them without it. Now, just like a fuel tank, you'll want to service these empty, right? It can be a daunting task to suck it out, right? But it helps. Sometimes you can just put it on a trans jack and drop the whole thing down. Really depends on what you guys want to do. Now, when it comes to this, right, the one thing you have to be careful with is on here, everything is all connected to each other, okay, which we're going to go over when we dissect the pump, all right? Because of that, when everything is all connected to each other, a lot of times when you're replacing one component, you're going to end up replacing multiple components, okay? Now, the one thing I want to talk about on here, as far as filling these up, the OEM repair manual tells you that you do need a special attachment with the hose, gravity feed, blah, 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 right? Obviously, easiest way, you can just get a funnel and then pour the depth fluid in. Now, what I like to do, and it works, if you get the small 2-gallon or the small 1-gallon little refill bottles, if you cut the back of it off, right, it now acts as a funnel that screws on to the service port. Okay, that service port, if you've ever seen it, it has so on the bottle, it has a spring with the check valve, so you can fill up that thing to the top, and then you can push it down, and it will start filling up. Right, you can hold it down as you're filling it, and once the tank gets full, what it's going to do is that you're going to stop seeing the fluid go down. You can actually pop up the spring, so now the bottle's sealed, and as soon as you unscrew it, you don't have any spillage over, right? Because we all know what happens to AdBlue when it gets exposed to oxygen. It starts crystallizing after a few minutes. Now, we don't want that to happen. One, it gets dirty. Some cases like the Passat, it's inside the interior of the trunk. It gets on the carpet. Customers will complain about it, okay? Now, with that, essentially what you want to do is get that, you're going to fill it up, handle it however you need to handle it, okay? So doesn't matter if it's a 4-cylinder, doesn't matter if it's a 6-cylinder, right? The pump itself essentially will look exactly like this. All right. Now, if you take a look and you see here, right, on the very top, you have the reducing agent pump, right? So it also has this thing called the reducing agent reverse valve. All right. The metering system is part of the pressure sensor, right? Connection line for the injectors. This is all being shown here. Now, this is the different views. Okay. The filter is at the bottom of this unit, right? This unit is not the pump. The pump sits at the top. Okay. There are components inside this unit, right? So we're going to go over that. Now, if you look at this, right, you have a supply line. Okay. So on the very top, there are ports here. This is the internals, right, which you cannot see. Now, this right here is where the pump sucks out the DEF fluid and it's going to send it to the injector. Okay. Now you also see here it says return line from reducing agent pump. Well, why do we have a return line? Okay. Because the way this works is once the car shuts off, your DEF fluid is not going to stay in the line. Why? Because in cold climates, it's going to freeze in the line, right? Even with the heater. So what it does is that it has a valve that returns that DEF fluid back to the tank. Okay. So that fluid will always come back. So usually that line should be empty when the car is not running. All right. You're going to have heaters inside here. The filter is at the bottom. Okay. You're going to see that it's just like some of these fuel pumps on the gas tanks where they lock into the bottom of the tank. All right. Now, that's very special too, because here's the thing. If you don't lock it down correctly, you can have issues. Because if you look at here at the top, the locking ring, this can come up and separate. Now, obviously, when we're getting these parts, I know you guys want to replace just, the pump, certain components. You got to think about it. Always remember this on the back of your mind. It is DEF fluid. It crystallizes. Just from you servicing it, it gets exposed to the oxygen. Just from exposing it to oxygen, obviously, that right there, it already starts deteriorating the fluid itself. Okay. Now, this is the typical system components, right? ECM is the main control for the system, right? Because it's going to be monitoring several things. It's going to be monitoring your NOx sensors. It's going to be monitoring O2 sensors, right? It's going to be monitoring what the particulate filter is doing. It's going to be monitoring the exhaust temperature. Another thing it's going to be monitoring, which a lot of people don't pay attention to, is coolant temperature. Okay. Coolant temperature has to be at operating temperature. If it is not, most of these regens will not go through. So it really depends on how some of these parts of the systems are introduced. So we need to make sure that we don't have other concerns, right? At the same time, sometimes people think, hey, why is this a blanket repair? Well, look, you have a couple faults here. You have an SCR fault here. You have to remember they all coincide to each other. All right. But you have a separate module for the heater. Okay. You have the ECM that controls it. The reservoir processing unit, that's basically going to look at the level in the tank. Okay. I will tell you this, you cannot look at the level on a scan tool. That data does not show up. How do you know if the tank's full? How do you know where it is? The only thing you could do is look down inside the fill neck. All right. Unfortunately, that's the only way. You can make a dipstick that goes down the filler neck, and you can see how far it is. Sometimes you can gauge it. That's the only thing you really can do. All right. Obviously, the rest of the components, you have the pump, the reversing agent, the heaters in the system. Then you will also have the filter at the bottom, and you will have the injector itself. All right. Now, I've mentioned the filter a couple times. The biggest thing you want to make sure when it comes to the filter, when you're servicing these things and pull it out, if that thing looks like it's dirty, compromised, whatever the case may be, you're going to replace that entire unit. Okay. when we tell you to replace these things, it's not because we're trying to blanket repair this. It's because there are issues with it from the SCR, from the DEF fluid. Okay. So the reducing agent pump, like I said, this sits at the very top, right? It's a direct current motor. Obviously, it's got a diaphragm pump on it. Now, this pump is pulse width modulated, right, by the ECM. ECM is going to tell you, hey, I need this pump to turn on to X amount of pressure, right? On here, most of them will have the pressure at about 5 bar. Okay, so realistically, that's what you want to check. Make sure you make that note. 5 bar is your number. 5 bar is about 72 psi. Okay, so when you want, you could actually disconnect the line, tee into it. I would suggest getting just another gauge because you don't want that mixing with fuel. You could have a separate gauge just for your SCR diagnosis, or not. Obviously, we don't have a whole lot of diesels left in the field, and obviously now, Volkswagen they're not going to introduce any diesels into their fleet, at least for any of the time being. The rest of the world, it's a different story, right? The rest of the world runs on diesel. Now, like I said, that pump there, obviously, if it's not producing 5 bar, we know there's an issue with the pump, right? These things fail. It's just like any other pump out there. Now, the pressure sensor is also in the pump, right? You can see here that it shows it being separate, right? If your pressure sensor is failing, you have to remember too, what's it being failed by? Could it be a wiring issue? Yeah, it's possible it's a wiring issue. Most of the time, it's going to be purely mechanical, right? You still have DEF fluid going through it. Now, when the diaphragm inside this sensor fails, that sensor needs to be replaced. But what else has to be replaced? I would be replacing that pump. Okay. I believe you can get this separate. It's not OEM. You got to get this as a whole unit, and they're not that expensive. You can get a whole entire repair kit for it. Okay. The other thing you want to take a look at here, this is that reversing valve, right? This is what we're talking about here when the engine is switched off. Okay. That reducing valve turns on, and basically it allows all the DEF fluid that's in the line to go back to the tank, right? Because if we didn't have that, we would have all kinds of issues with DEF fluid freezing in the lines. All right. So obviously this is how it works, right? So the pump comes on, reducing agent from the tank, it goes to the motor, right? It's going to go to the injector, right? Once it's switched off, it actually just lifts the magnet via coil, and it basically actuates the plate. It opens the plate to an empty position. So what happens is that everything that's in the line to the injector is closed because it's not being activated. Now it allows the DEF fluid to return to the tank, right? If you have an issue where the DEF fluid is not returning, then we all know that, yeah, that could be an issue with the actual pump itself, because you cannot get the reversing valve by itself. It comes with the pump. Okay. Now, reducing agent processing unit, right? So that reducing agent, it has sensors in the actual reservoir. This is how it calculates how much fluid is left in the tank, right? We've all seen it. You guys have seen customers that brought their cars in with different warnings. Hey, 1,500 miles left till, it needs to be, before the car doesn't start. Oh, 1,000 miles left, 500 miles left, right? Starts getting real serious, right? Once you're under 100 miles, you start seeing 50 miles, right? I'll tell you this, once you start getting that low, any issues that you have in the car, they have to be repaired. It will not allow it to start. Okay. You can reset it every time, but the only way to do it, obviously, is going to be with the factory tool, and you're going to have to reset it every single time. Now, that signal here, right, it's going to calculate that. It's going to go through that processing unit. That processing unit just sends that information straight to the ECM. That way the ECM knows, hey, I need to put a warning to the customer. Hey, I need to put it on display for the cluster. Okay. So obviously, like I said, that processing unit, it has 4 sensors, right? And you can see it has lower level, middle level, upper level, okay? It measures how much fluid is in there. It basically gives you a countdown based off of the level on there, right? Now, obviously, we know that that pulse width modulated signal coming from the sensor is going to let the ECM know what the level is in the tank. The ECM is going to then spit that information back to the cluster. Like I said, there is no actual measure value block that you can actually monitor that. This is just for the ECM to do, okay? Now, heating circuit on these things, right? The biggest thing about the heating circuit on here is we all know when it gets cold, especially when it gets down to freezing temperatures, it says what? At 12 degrees is where it freezes. Well, we do know that most places will get down under 20, right? Well, when it gets down to 12, even then, it starts to get to the point where it can start to crystallize. Now, we have the heaters in the system, right? Now, the heater doesn't come on at all times. So obviously, if you have an issue with the heater coming on all times, you could have an issue with the actual control module being shorted, right? And that's the reducing agent heater control module, which sits right next to the pump unit. Or you can have an issue with something else that's shorted there, right? Now, you're going to have a couple things here. You're going to have a reducing agent tank heater, so that's in the actual tank. You're going to have a reducing agent pump heater, which is in the actual pump. Reducing agent line heater, which is in most of the line, right? But you'll also see that the ECM calculates all this based on outside air temperature. So obviously, if we have an outside air temperature sensor issue, right? Let's say rodent damage or whatever the case may be, that's going to affect your heating circuit on here. You could have heating faults due to outside temperature faults. Okay. So that heater inside the tank, when you're looking at it, okay, the whole point of that is to keep the fluid in a tank from freezing. Obviously, it's in a plastic tank, right? There's not much insulation if you've ever seen these, right? Most of these have an aluminum cage. There might be a little bit insulation, but that's not enough to keep the cold out. All right. Now, the whole purpose of this tank heater, which is actually in the lower portion of the unit that goes into the tank itself, so the pump unit, it keeps the DEF fluid from freezing in there. But at the same time, you know, once it sucks it out, the heater in the pump itself will keep that fluid heated to the point where it gets to the injector. All right. Now, it usually comes on at low temperatures, not necessarily at freezing. Okay. So 19 degrees, like I said, 20 degrees is what we were talking about. 19 degrees is the actual number. But at 19 degrees, that is when the heater is turned on via the heater module from the ECM. Okay, so 19 degrees. I know a lot of you guys, some of you guys are in the very cold states. That's a good number to look at. Okay, depending on what the outside. So obviously, if you're having heater issues, right? If you're 19 degrees and lower, that's what we need to take a look at. Now, we also have that heating circuit that's in the actual pump. Obviously, this is internal in the pump because what happens is if you look right here, this is where it sits in the actual reservoir tank that goes into the actual tank. So your fluid's going to come up here, and it's going to do is that it's going to heat your DEF fluid as it goes out, right, to the injector. Okay. Your line, your reducing agent line, will have a heating wire or heating element that's in the entire line, right? So it's basically a spiral, it's wound up, right? It's inside the tube that you see. Now, we can have an issue with that. If you have something with, you'll see a fault for like reducing agent light heater, whatever the case may be, right? Now, if you check out your module, I mean, here's the thing. There's no way to really test this because you won't know if it is indeed good, other than unplugging this connector and verifying its continuity. Okay. Now, that being said, you can verify that if it's broken, you have an open circuit, you're not going to find it to repair. You're going to replace the entire line. Unfortunately, the way it's wound up, you're not going to find it. All right. We've had a couple of these before. You know, if you look at the way the line is, people have seen it from, you know, roadside damage, whatever the case may be. You're going to want to replace that line. So in the heater, sorry, before I pass this, right? In the actual injector, you're going to have the exact same thing. Okay. So the heater will have it as well. Essential, and the injector. So basically, when you're pulling out the injector, you're going to monitor that as well. Now, this is the different warnings that you will get due to the AdBlue, right? So the first warning that comes out, you'll get a warning. You will have a warning, a gong, all right? It'll say less than 1,500 miles. When you get that, you'll see a bottle appear, and it says, hey, we need to fill it up because you're getting low, right? The customer doesn't fill it up, and they keep going. Now we're at 600 miles, okay? It's enough to drive that remaining mileage, but you won't be able to start the vehicle once it's shut off. Okay. 0 miles, right? You get 3 times the warning. When that happens, it's a red bottle. Doesn't matter if you fill this up. You cannot get that to clear unless you use the factory tool to clear it, right? So there are different colors on the bottles. White just means you can fill it. Yellow is a warning. Yellow also means that, hey, next time you shut this off, if you don't fill it up, it won't restart. When it comes to red, you're done. Okay. This thing needs to get fixed. Obviously, when you get this too, the use of incorrect agent, and like I said, when it comes to DEF fluid and it comes to Volkswagen Audi, they're very particular on the type to use in it. My recommendation, go to the dealer and get it, right? You can use some of the ones that they have on like FCP Euro, depends on what it is, but you have to use the OEM AdBlue. It has to be AdBlue, okay? It really doesn't cost that much more than the generic DEF fluid that you see out there, right? Now, federal standards require that the vehicle not start under those conditions, right? Not enough reducing agent in the tank, reducing agent metering, the injection is not possible due to errors. Reducing agent qualifies, quality is inadequate. Reducing their deviations in the reducing agent consumption, there's leaks. Whatever the case may be, federal standards make Volkswagen and Audi do this. I'm sure it's the same with other manufacturers as well, but this basically prevents the car from being driven on the road because they're very hard on diesels. Now, this is just a screenshot of Otis, the factory software. You guys have it, great. This is the best thing and the only tool you can use, unfortunately, when it comes to resetting it. All right. This particular car here does not actually have a SCR, but very similar system. Okay. And this would be used for diagnosis. Now, normally you'd go in, engine control module, you would right click it, you'd have some guided functions here. Now, if you take a look, you have different things, right? Adjust EGR differential pressure, adjust PF differential pressure sensors, relearning the values for NOx storage catalyst converter, checking ash residue diesel particulate filters. Like I said, that's really not related to the NOx. The only thing you're going to have related to NOx is service regeneration for NOx cat converter, right? Now, when it comes to that, most of us know that you think that you can do the NOx regen with the scan tool. You really can't, even with the factory tool. All it does is it turns it on, okay? You can't monitor anything. It won't really do anything. Sometimes it will show you and it'll show you that, hey, you're driving it. If it fails, it will fail. I'm going to give you the little secrets and the hints to get it to go through without an issue, at least hopefully. Okay. Now, the best thing about this is that you're going to look at measure value blocks. Okay. These measure value blocks you can use any scan tool to do, but essentially, when you're looking at it, you can actually pull these different information that you need to look at, right? You're going to want to look at coolant temp, right? You want to make sure that this car is at operating temperature. You want to look at when the last time was regen, right? You get a car in where we've had a couple here, right? This is now 2025 and the diesel only has 80,000 miles on the cluster. That car is not driven very much, right? Problem with that is when it's not driven very much, it never goes to regen. You say, hey, what, like, why does it need a particulate filter? Why does it need a NOx catalyst this early? Well, the car wasn't regen, so it's all plugged up. Okay. Same thing goes when you have a NOx issue and you'll get concerns where, you have a consumption issue. Well, if you had a leaking injector, what happens? Well, that DEF fluid is just going to leak inside the catalyst, right? And then it's going to crystallize inside the catalyst because there's oxygen inside that catalyst. So you can actually look at the measure value blocks to see when the last regen was done. Okay. This will actually show you regen on the particulate filter. It will actually show you the regen on NOx catalyst as well. When you're going through it, you can look at this and this will usually be what it shows. Okay. It will show you the last regen, how long ago it was, how many times it was requested on this one. Number of requests for regen 4 times, right? Fuel consumption since last successful regen, particulate filter, right? Well, some of these numbers are 0. On this particular car here, that car was actually there for a plugged up NOx catalyst and also a particulate filter. So this car was never done. So some of the information you can actually look at measure value block to see it. Okay. Now, like I said, this is the NOx catalyst service regen if you have the factory tool, what it's going to tell you to do, right? And these are very important because you need to see this, right? Fuel tank has to be at least a quarter tank. 1, it's because it's going to take forever for it to go through. 2, ambient air temperature outside is greater than negative 10 degrees Celsius, so fairly cold that you can still do it, right? Consistent test drive, it says between 40 to 75. 40 is usually a low number. I can tell you that the number that I'm going to give you is a better number to get these things to go through. Duration under ideal regen is 40 minutes. Obviously, that's ideal. So that's minimum. All right. Usually takes about, on a normal working system, about 40 to 45 minutes. Okay. This one, you want to activate the service regen, you activate it, right? It tells you, hey, to do it quickly as possible, good requirements, low traffic, obviously, level roads, constant driving cycle, drive with cruise control, engine RPM between 1900 to 2400. So this is exactly what I'm going to be telling you when we do the regen, right? You want to drive between 2000 to 2000 to 2500 RPMs. You want to go between 60 to 65 miles an hour so you can knock it down to 5th gear and drive it in 5th gear, hit the cruise control. You're going to be very slow in traffic. I would just get in the right-hand lane and just cruise it. If you come up to any type of traffic, okay, the problem with traffic is that if you get to traffic and it stops, the car will notice it and it will basically kick out of the regen. Okay. Doesn't matter if, you're almost done, right? It will kick you out of the regen. You have to start over from scratch. Depending on where you are, I'm in California, I'm in the Los Angeles area. We used to have customers drive down to San Diego. It's about an 1.5 to 2 hour drive. That will usually get it done. Okay. NOx catalyst regen, 60, 65 miles per hour is what you want to be, 2,000, 2,500 RPMs, 5th gear, anywhere from 45 minutes to 4 hours, depending on how bad the system is, right? Steady driving, no traffic stops. Thermostat operation normal. You want to verify that your thermostat is operating at basically the way it should be working. Because if your thermostat's not working, if it's stuck open, you're never getting to operating temp in time, this car will not go through regen. And the last but not least, You cannot have a single fault in the ECM. If you have faults, the regens will not go through. Okay. Forced regens for the particulate filters will go through because obviously the scan tool is causing it. And usually what the scan tool does is that if you have too much soot, it drops the number down so the car will go into it. All right. Andrew Kennedy asked your question, will they not regen below -10 degrees Celsius? They will not. Okay. The car goes into stupid mode and it basically says, I don't know what's going on. All right. I'm going to go over a couple tech bulletins here that we've seen some issues with. Okay. This technical bulletin here essentially is going to be on, hey, you got a pump. You just installed a new pump on here. What's going on? Well, a lot of times they swap over the grommets, right? Or you get new ones. Now, this is the issue that we have seen. When you swap over the grommets, you do not put the grommets in the correct position. Now, if you take a look at the metal spacer, is supposed to be facing up. That's where the bolt goes through, right? If that spacer goes down, because there is a certain direction that it goes down, because that's a rubber grommet. And if you do not put it in the correct position, what's going to happen is that you're going to have a gap. When you have that gap, you're going to have a leak. Okay, it will leak internally. It will not build enough pressure. So verify that on some of the cars that you do the pump and hey, it's still not building enough pressure. Make sure that the grommet is installed in the correct position, right? I mean, you guys have seen this before, right? AdBlue injector, you'll see the reductant pressure is too low, white crystallization. Well, they actually came out with this tech bulletin on the Beetles, okay, and some of the Golfs that had the AdBlue. Now, that being said, I've seen these on the A3s. What you're going to want to do when you see this, all right, how's that AdBlue getting out all over? It's crystallizing. Well, one, it needs an injector, okay? That's part of the problem. The second thing is that there's actually an issue with the line, all right? Now, they actually came out with an updated part. It's an updated injector and it's an updated line. Now, that line does go all the way back to the tank. All right. So when you see this, just cleaning it is not going to do anything. Okay. You might salvage it for a little bit. Essentially, it's just going to be a band-aid. But what you're going to want to do is replace the injector and replace the entire line. All right. Now, this is one thing that we talked about earlier, right? 32.5%. That's what they want to see, right? Recommended AdBlue concentration. This is for Volkswagen and also Audi. It's just Volkswagen has an actual technical bulletin on it. Now, you don't need to have the special tool, the T10007 refractometer. You can get an aftermarket refractometer. It will do the exact same thing. But your mixture should not be less than 30.5 or greater than 35. You want it to be right in between. 32.5 is where you want that to be. If it's not, you got to replace the depth fluid first, okay? When it's not that, you have issues. So you do definitely need to have this tool with you, because when you do check it out, because one of the common things, right, it's just like when we have a lean condition on the gas engine, okay? What can also be a cause of lean condition? Fuel quality. Same thing here. AdBlue quality can cause issues. You can have a NOx catalyst efficiency fault due to bad depth fluid. Okay, so we need to make sure that the depth fluid gets checked out when you're monitoring and checking these things. Now, another thing you can do, which this technical bulletin's on, okay, SCR injector quantity test. All right, make sure you have a granulated cylinder and make sure you have the correct ones, right? Depending on what you're measuring, right? On the 3-liter TDI, most of them are going to be 30 ml after 10 minutes. Okay. The 4 cylinders can be anywhere from 164 ml to 176 ml. All right, depending on the car. Now, this number is only acquired with the factory software. No other tool will have that. Especially for that, when you're looking at that value here, right? It's a 10-minute test. There are tools that can do the test, but this is the value, okay? Make sure you have the right cylinder, because this is very particular, because this is how you know if your injector is, one, working correctly, and two, this is also making sure that your pump is working efficiently. All right. Now, this right here, okay, this is the refill for the SCR lock, right? This is a cheat for the Turgs and the Q7s, okay? All SCR faults must be addressed, right? Vehicle start it's not possible. AdBlue lock is still on a reset, right? You go to the ECM, you can go to adaptation channel. In the hex field, the value that's 00 and 0, you go to 00 and 19, right? When you change that value, it basically resets it, right? It's enough to reset the car so you can get an additional 50 miles and then basically allow the light to reset, okay? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Depends on what other conditions you have going on with the car, okay? Last technical bulletin that I just kind of brought up on here, all right? You get reductant pressure too high, reductant metering performance, all right? In the car, okay? AdBlue filter seal inside the level sensor module gets damaged. Now, that being said, that housing internally, you can get it to fall off, okay? So when it falls off, okay, the filter element, and that's what we talked about the filter earlier, you can see in figure 2 that the filter element is loose inside that tank. When it's loose inside that tank, you'll get all kinds of stuff that goes up into it and then basically jams up the pump, and if it goes further up, will cause damage to the injector and also cause issues with the line. All right. Realistically, the biggest thing, that I hope you guys get out of it is make sure the depth fluid that we're taking a look at, make sure obviously it's going to be around 32.5%, right? Brandon here says BMW, right? 31.8 to 33.3%, right? Volkswagen's very happy at 32.5. We don't really see too many issues. 35 at the end of it, it gets a little bit on the questionable side. But once you get there, they basically want you. And you can go and test this with the depth fluid that you see at your local gas station and see if you really wanted to, right? You can see the difference by measuring between the different manufacturers. So I always recommend the AdBlue from Volkswagen. I think BMW might use the same thing, and I think Mercedes uses the exact same thing. But other than that, this pretty much concludes all that. We do have another webinar coming up, right? Wednesday, May 7th. Brandon, who is moderating this also, we're going to be talking about the DrivePro 2. It's an introduction. This is our new tool on here. All right. So it's going to be a little bit more in-depth of explanation on the tool itself, what new features we have on it, and the introduction of Eden and everything else. So Brandon will be talking about that. We do have that webinar coming up on it. Last one here, big old QR code. If you have any questions, right, you want to find out any more information on the different products we have, the DrivePro 2, IVS connected technical support, right? If you want to just do technical support, if you guys don't have a tool, you want to talk, you want to find out about our IVS wrap program, you want to find out about the Cardac Pro, which essentially is a Cardac 3 in a box, right? If you have any other questions, and if you have any other questions in general, you can scan this QR code and get in contact with us. One of them, let's say you had a Volkswagen Audi question, whatever the case may be, you can hit the same thing and they'll reach out to me. Other than that, I hope you guys had a good time with this webinar. And I think that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for joining us this evening, and hope you guys have a good one.